Hey there, language learners. Welcome to Rapid English Podcast, where learning English is fast, fun, and effortless. Grab a coffee, relax, and dive into real practical English with us. Hit subscribe and let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling something that I think a lot of us have thought about at some point. The idea that knowing English is power.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're, getting ready for a big international meeting or just kind of fascinated by how language is changing or maybe somewhere in between, I think it's worth exploring what's really behind that idea. Like, what does it even mean?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's easy to just accept these kinds of statements without really digging deeper.
Right. Exactly. And we're going to go beyond the usual talking points here. We'll also see if there's maybe like a flip side to this power. Could there be any downsides?
Interesting.
And to help us unpack all of this, we have an expert who can really get into the nitty-gritty of how language shapes, well, pretty much everything.
Well, I don't know about everything, but I'll certainly do my best. It is a fascinating topic, though.
Isn't it? So let's jump right in.
All right, let me do it. What should we start?
Well, let's start with that statement, knowing English is power. What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting, right? That simple phrase has so many layers to it. I mean, what kind of power are we talking about? Is it about influence, access, something else entirely? And is it really that simple?
Yeah, it does seem almost too straightforward, doesn't it? I mean, we all know, English is used everywhere, like in business and tech and all that, but what are the specific ways that this so-called power actually plays out in the real world?
Okay, well, I think we're going to start with probably the most obvious one, communication. English is often used as a common language across borders, across cultures.
Oh, right, right. Like when diplomats are trying to hammer out treaties or scientists are sharing their findings.
Exactly. Or even just tourists trying to order food in a foreign country.
I've definitely been there.
Right. It happens all the time. So, English can definitely facilitate collaboration and understanding on a global scale, which can be incredibly powerful.
It makes sense, but wouldn't that also mean that a lot of information is locked away for people who don't speak English?
That's a great point. And that brings us to another dimension of this power, which is access to knowledge. Think about it. So much of the research, the book, online resources, a significant portion of it is primarily available in English.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right.
So fluency in English really opens up this huge world of information and perspectives, and that undoubtedly translates to power in many, many contexts.
Okay, so knowing English is almost like having a key. It unlocks certain doors.
I like that analogy, absolutely. And that's where we start to see the economic aspect of this power come into play, too.
Economic. Oh, yeah, right. Because in today's job market, especially with everything being so global, English is often like a basic requirement for a lot of good jobs, right?
Absolutely. In a globalized job market, English proficiency can be a prerequisite for higher paying positions. It can also give individuals a competitive edge, even within their own countries.
Right, right. It makes sense, but isn't there a risk that if we put too much emphasis on English, it could lead to inequalities or even stifle the growth of other languages and cultures?
That is a crucial point, and it's one that we can't overlook. While English can be a bridge between cultures, we have to acknowledge that there's also the potential for imbalances. The dominance of one language, in some cases, can sadly lead to the marginalization of others.
Wow, yeah.
And, we also can't forget the potential for miscommunication and misunderstandings, even when everyone is speaking English.
Oh, yeah.
Because cultural nuances, those can easily get lost in translation.
Right.
Which can have some pretty significant consequences, especially in things like diplomacy or business negotiations where the stakes are really high.
Oh, I see. It's almost like a double-edged sword then, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Like on the one hand, yeah, English offers these undeniable advantages in our super globally connected world, but we also can't ignore the potential downsides.
Precisely. And I think that's why it's so important to be aware of these complexities and, strive for a more equitable access to language-winning resources while at the same time respecting linguistic diversity. It's a delicate balance.
Okay, so to sum it all up, knowing English can be a super powerful tool, for communicating, accessing knowledge, and just navigating our globalized world.
Right.
But it's important to be mindful of the potential for inequality.
Yes.
And, remember that it's important to preserve linguistic diversity.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Great. Now, before we wrap up, I have a question for all of you listening out there.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
In what ways do you think knowing English, or maybe even not knowing it, could shape your path, like your own personal path?
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's something to think about. It's a big question. What choices might you make differently? How might it affect your opportunities? I think it's a question worth pondering as we navigate this increasingly interconnected world.
Absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.
Thanks for joining us, and to everyone listening, thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
See ya!